It's full moon, a time KwaZulu-Natal farmers say their livestock is most at risk. And the threat comes from across the border in Lesotho. The moonlight assists Basotho stock thieves to help themselves to livestock and horses and drive them back over harsh terrain to the mountain kingdom.
I lost 414 cattle and 43 horses.
And how many were there that were taken at the same time?
13. 13 mares with their foals, including their foals.
Underberg farmers like John Michaud and horse breeder Jane Watson know the drill. Once the animals are over the border, their branding is burned off and replaced. And bits of the animal's ears are severed.
To prove the ownership that they own the horse now because it has their ear marking on it.
Most animals will never be seen again by their original owners. If recovered by police in Lesotho, they're often left to starve in their animal pounds. Some will be cut up for meat. Heimville dairy farmer Kevin Price Moore, his wife Alison and their daughter Sarah had 4 horses stolen in November last year. 2, which may have been too slow to take over the border, were recovered in Underberg.
So they took the 2 sort of hardier animals.
A gelding called Cry and a black stallion, Toffelux, were driven to Lesotho. These are not tough mountain ponies. In fact, they've been well fed, they're stabled, they're pampered, and they're very trusting. Overnight, they're herded. Wire is tied in their mouths. They're driven over the hills into Lesotho to be there before sunrise. They even get stabbed in the rump to keep them moving. Those that falter could be pushed over a cliff or stoned to death so that the other horses don't return to look for them. Desperate to retrieve Cry and Toffelux, Sarah joined a modern-day posse into Lesotho to look for them.
I went up with a group of local farmers here who have been affected by stock theft. We went up about 50 of us.
10 days after he'd been stolen, they tracked down Cry.
He had had his ears cut. You could see that he had been worked and ridden quite hard for the last sort of 10 days that he had been there. Blood all down his face.
The thief admitted he'd stolen the horse. He was also involved in the assault and robbery of an elderly couple in Underberg. Sarah says she was lucky Cry's captor gave him up so easily, but finding him wasn't the end of their ordeal. When the Lesotho police arrested the thief, they wouldn't let Cry go home.
And they said, no, he may still be an exhibit. You know, he may still come up. They may still want him in court.
The Lesotho police wanted to put Cry into a pound. And that's when Sarah first became aware of what went on at the Lesotho police's horse and cattle pounds.
The pounds, there's no water, there is no feed. You just actually don't know if your horse is going to be there the next day.
Sarah refused to leave her horse. After 5 days in court, she finally got him released and brought home. He's one lucky horse. But Toffelux was still missing. Farmers all along the border have horror stories of animal abuse in Lesotho pounds. Tabatseka, Kwashu's Neck, Lariba, Mafeteng. Horrified by images of the pounds, the Price Moors had been hunting for the black stallion. We went along on one of their many trips to find him. First stop was the pound at Mogotlong, 4 hours from Heimville on a treacherous road. And as you can see, it's complete 4x4 territory, so to come and claim your animals must be a real challenge. Halfway, Kevin saw a horse that looked like Toffelux.
Did that horse look like Toffelux?
Yeah, it could have been. Maybe just go back and have a look.
Yeah, we'll just turn around and have a look there.
But on closer inspection...
It wasn't our horse, but it certainly was hard stopping. Every time we come up here, we drive past a black horse and we think maybe that's the one that we've lost. And this was pretty close, but it wasn't him.
We carried on to Mogotlong, but when we got there, we found an empty pound. According to Kevin and Sarah, who've been at this pound every 3 weeks for the last 5 months, they've only seen sick, wounded and injured and sometimes dying horses. Today, however, we've been told that the horses are well enough to be put to pasture.
Maybe they are doing something about it, or maybe they've got word that we're actually coming up today.
A month earlier, it had been a very different scenario.
As we arrived here, just outside here, there was a dead horse, and they were busy cutting that open, and they were there with a wheelbarrow, and they were just carting the meat off. This is why we're worried that once animals are in the pound, they're supplying free meat for the locals.
The pound was also filled with horses in a poor state. Can you explain some of the injuries they had?
Horrific back injuries from saddle sores and just dehydrated and could hardly move and just in very poor state.
Did they receive any kind of food?
No, certainly not fed anything. We put in that water trough.
There's meant to be a pound master at Mogotlong, but Kevin says no one ever steps forward. We had a look around for the horses, and instead of finding them grazing, found this macabre scene. Less than 2 kilometers away from a suspiciously empty pound, and we found a heap of skins. Kevin estimated that there were at least 200 skins rotting in the sun.
A whole pile of skins. Obviously the animals have died and someone's skinned them to use the meat. Otherwise I would have just thrown the carcass away.
Convinced the horses they'd seen on their previous trip had been slaughtered, Kevin, Alison and Sarah headed for the local police station armed with hidden cameras. We explained that we were looking for a stolen stallion.
You know where the horses from the pound have gone? We want to see if one of our stolen horses is there.
The stolen horse?
Yeah.
Oh, the what is that dealing with that pound for this one?
This one next door here?
Yes.
Next door, we were met by a Mr. Katsia. He invited us into his office, but said he couldn't help us.
Not you.
We were referred to a third policeman who couldn't help us either.
Let me ask the inspector.
The inspector turned out to be this man, dressed in civilian clothes. He at least seemed to know where the horses were and even how many.
There are 9 horses.
Accompanied by 4 police officers, the so-called inspector, and 3 municipal officials, we were taken to a hillside a few kilometers from the pound. The animals weren't in good nick, but were at least being fed. But still, no sign of Tofelax. This mare had clearly been rebranded a few times. Do you think that they're being let out on a daily basis to graze?
It certainly looks like it from here. So it depends how long they've been in the pound before they've lost any weight.
We continued on our journey, and what we found at the Mapolaneng pound 30 kilometers away was a very different story. So we found the pound and it's almost too distressing for words. It's filled with animals on the brink of starvation and death. There are no horses here, but there are donkeys, cows and sheep. Even though there's grass near the barren pound, the animals couldn't get to it. Fresh sheep skins were an indication that slaughtering was also happening here. Sarah had to visit more than 1 pound like this in search of Tofelax. It must fill you with grief every time you come across a place like this.
It does, because you don't really know if, maybe they did spend their last couple of days in this condition having to suffer like these animals are having to suffer. So, yeah, it's heartbreaking, it's stressing, it's everything.
Not long after we arrived, a police car drove in. Mr. Katsia from the pound in Mogotlong. We renewed acquaintances.
And we're just looking in the pounds to see if...
The pounds?
These are the pounds? Yeah, I'm looking for my horse.
Oh, your horses?
Yeah.
It seems as maybe some of them they've already died.
Already died? What did they die from?
Yeah, because of hunger.
Hunger?
So these animals now, what will happen to these ones here in this pond? Yeah.
Now we are still waiting for the owners to come and look for them.
But there's no way of informing owners that their animals are here. It's a case of trekking from one pound to the other to look.
If an animal dies in the pound and no one's claimed it, they hang these ears on the fences and the owners can come and identify the notch on the ear of the animal.
Mr. Katsia didn't seem fazed by the state of the animals and insisted they were being grazed and watered every day.
So have they been out today?
They have already been here.
You think so?
But they haven't eaten. You can see these animals haven't been out and they haven't eaten.
They have already eaten.
Visibly upset, Kevin decided it was time to head back.
And just so ashamed to be a human being that other people can treat animals like this. It's dreadful.
With no apparent will in Lesotho to change the system, South African farmers have banded together to form stock theft associations. John Pierce runs the Heimville unit. He says things really got out of hand when the army stopped patrolling the Lesotho border in 2006.
And cross-border stock theft went up 300%.
So that really does work very well to have that border constantly patrolled.
Yes.
In June 2010, farmers on the Free State side of the border with Lesotho took the state to court. Government agreed to repair fences and roads along the border and do patrols. But 2 years later, farmers say that hasn't happened and want a judge to find them in contempt of court.
These people from Lesotho are armed. We've had farmers shot at here. The police have been shot at.
So it's still up to farmers to find their animals before they end up in the pounds, dead, starving or traumatized.
Even now when we try and put the bridle on and going over his ear, we have to, warn him that we're doing that and just remind him that we're not going to hurt him. We're not the baddies.